Well, thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be here on the first, Protect Our Power event. And as the introduction said, this topic, real-time asset and network monitoring, is something that I've been highly involved with, passionate about for quite a long time. Back in 2004, I led a team that got a grant from the Department of Homeland Security to develop the first ICS signatures. And they were basic things for Modbus, DNP3, ICCP, things like that. Really basic proof of concept. And they got integrated into all these different products. Cisco and just about anyone who had an IDS integrated them. And for us, it was just a little research project, and we expected a bunch of companies to take up this effort and actually build products around that. Unfortunately, for about all the way till about 2015, those simple signatures were state of the art. But fortunately, what's happened is since 2015, there's just been an explosion of companies, as you can see in this word chart or word cloud up there, that have been getting a lot of funding and have been doing a lot of great work in developing a detection capability around passive monitoring. And I would say take what we had that was state-of-the-art back in 2015, and it's 1,000, 100,000, maybe even 1,000,000 times better. So we've seen just tremendous growth in this capability. But one thing, we're talking about best practices here. It's right behind me, and I was really happy to hear Ms. Kelly say that we're going to talk about existing and emerging best practices, because this area is in flux. It is changing a lot. I can't tell you this is what you should do today, this is the best practice, because it'll be different 6 months from now, a year from now, probably 3 years from now. So what I'm going to try to do here is give you an idea of how you should look at this new product category, the trends in it, and maybe some things you should be careful not to do as you're looking at it. Okay, so let's actually talk about it. What are these things? All those companies in that word cloud, what are they actually producing? And it's funny, when you look at it, it's a hodgepodge of different capabilities. So they started out as classic passive network monitoring tools to detect cyber incidents and cyber attacks. That's what they were going to do. And then all of a sudden, they went out to the asset owners, they started to pilot these things, install these things, demo these things, and the companies that might buy them were looking at it and saying, wow, what is that? I didn't know we had that on our network. Or they were getting all this information about the assets. Oh, this is talking to that, and this is doing that. And all of a sudden, they said, can you give us more of that? So this detection solution turned into a detection and automated asset inventory solution. So now you have two actually pretty different things that you're trying to do wrapped up in one product. And if we take this a step further, asset inventory is really just part of asset management, right? So you've got your configuration control, your management of change, your vulnerability management. So you've got one foot in these products in asset management, and then another foot in detection, because again, network monitoring is just one part of your detection strategy. And then to take it one last step further, especially if you think of this in terms of the NIST cybersecurity framework, we have kind of identification, detection, and then we're also talking potentially about using these solutions for response. So they're actually saying, oh, and by the way, once it detects things, then you can use this to analyze what you saw, help you create a response, and help you see how effective that response is. So it's a strange mix of capabilities that are being bundled together in these offerings. And one of the things that I think we're going to see is this is going to shake itself out over the next 1 to 3 years. So it may end up that everything gets bundled into one product, but that would be unlikely in my view. More likely what you're going to see is you're going to see these products tend to drift to what they do best. So there might be an asset management product that comes out of these new core capabilities that you're seeing. There could be a detection product. There could be an OT SIM product. It could be a variety of different things. And they're going to share data together using the RESTful or REST API. So this is kind of the first example I'm going to give you, and you'll see there's, as we go through this, you want to make sure you don't lock in your strategy too early here, because the way this market's going to shake out is going to change, and you might be buying different products with different capabilities 2 years from now to replace what you have piloted this year. If you look at the data sheets, though, most of them are using this REST or RESTful API as the way that they plan on sharing data. So these systems will need to share data with each other, and they're envisioning that. It's just how much of it is going to be in each one of those products. Okay, so now let's dive into some of these product capabilities, and the two main ones, your asset inventory and your detection. So this has been the fight over the last 2 or 3 years. And it really hasn't been a fair fight, because the only one doing active really was Indigi, with Langner Communication on the asset management side was doing active as well. But everyone else was saying you can't do active. And by this we mean you connect this thing up to your network. Is it passively just listening to what it's seeing over a switch? Or can it actually inject packets onto your system to learn information to help get a better asset inventory? And for the last 2 years, just until a couple of months ago, almost everyone in that word cloud, almost all the companies were saying, it's got to be passive. We can't put anything on the network. It's much too dangerous. If you do that, you're crazy. Passive, passive, passive. Until a couple of months ago, when they said, oh, now we have active. Some of the market leaders. They just complete change. And it's actually funny. I visited one of the market leaders 2 years ago at their facility, and they started giving me this passive switch, and they said, we're only passive. We never put anything on your network. And I said, that's too bad, because you can actually get a lot more information and a lot more accurate information if you're active. And they kind of pulled me aside and said, well, we really do. We have active, but whenever we tell anyone that, they get real nervous. So we just say passive. But that fight that I'm talking about is just about over now. The reason why active is better is you can actually send out commands, and these are not scanning commands like a Nessus scanner, which is just sending a bunch of bad packets at your systems. You're sending legitimate ICS or application commands to say, what firmware version do you have? What cards do you have? What type of system are you? Legitimate commands that the device is expecting and supports. So that's why you can get so much better information. And as I said, 2 of the market leaders announced that they now support active right at the end of last year, and I would be very surprised if you don't see the rest that are claiming an asset inventory capability doing that. Now, if you're still in the camp that says, I can't do passive, either I can't convince my OT team to allow me to do it, the people in my power plant or in my transmission or distribution SCADA, they won't let me do it. If you're still in that camp, then you have to sort of simulate it. And the way you do that is you ask your engineering workstation or whatever application you have to run its diagnostic commands. And they'll send out the commands, and the passive solution will be able to watch the responses. So in effect, you're active anyways. You're just using, instead of using this new product you're buying in an active means, you're using an ICS application or device to be active for the same sort of reason, because you get more information and more accurate information. Okay, so hopefully that answers one of the big questions that has been out there. Another thing we're seeing I would say in the asset management side of these products is they're adding a vulnerability management capability. And when I started hearing this made no sense to me. Why would you do this in this product? And so I asked some of the vendors, why are you doing this? And they say, it's what the customers want. Okay, they actually are getting customer demand for this capability to be in their product. Since this is such a new and competitive market, customers, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, are driving what capabilities are in these products. So they're very knee-jerk reaction. Oh, you want that? Okay, I can do it. I'll ship it to you in 2 months. So what they're doing on vulnerability management is you're using this software inventory. They're then taking the vulnerabilities that they get from ICS Cert, their vendors, a variety of vulnerability feeds, and they're able to tell the customer, hey, your system on these assets are missing these patches. Okay, so that sounds great, right? Why wouldn't we want that? The reason why I'm not sure that this is actually going to end up in the product, in my mind, I'm thinking this is an interim solution, is because at the end of the day, you have to apply the patches, right? And if you have a system of any size, you don't want to be doing that manually. You're going to have an automated tool to do that. There's a number of them out there. As far as I know, none of the products that we're talking about in this kind of strange product category actually apply patches. So as an asset owner or an operator of this system, you still have to deploy another application to deploy the patches, and that application should also be able to give you patch status information. So one of two things is going to happen. Either the existing vulnerability management solutions are going to integrate the ICS intelligence and you'll use those, or perhaps one of the solutions we're talking about in this session is actually going to add the capability to deploy patches. And I don't know which way that's going to go. But this is a major part now. This is what was really being rolled out last year and is resulting in some purchases for this as one of the main drivers. Okay, that's the asset inventory side. On the detection side, again, remember, this was the reason these products were created. This is the reason these companies receive funding. And so this is their main purpose, I would say, or at least for many of them, their main purpose. Now, it's important to note that this passive network monitoring is only one part of a detection solution. And I see this mistake made a lot of times. Companies will say, we need to have a detection capability, and they go straight to buy one of these products. You really have to ask yourself, is your detection capability at the maturity level where this product makes sense? So the way I'd suggest you do it is create a list of all your detection sources of information, and then put that in priority order based on the effectiveness and the efficiency of that data. So for example, will this source of data give you a lot of false positives or have false negatives? How much time will it take you to look through this data? And what kind of talent will you require? What kind of products will you have to buy? And what you'll find out when you do that is you probably have a lot of very high fidelity detection sources on your system that you should be looking at first before you even consider one of these products. And I have a simple example up there. We see a lot of people deploying application whitelisting and antivirus and other endpoint protection, and then not even monitoring the alerts. So, if you get an alert on your endpoint protection, you better do something about that. Or, for example, if you have something on your industrial control system network that is trying to phone home to something on the internet, it's a good chance you have something bad happening on your network. Okay, so don't look at these new products, this passive network monitoring as your detection solution. It's a component in your detection solution, and make sure you're at the right point. And again, I see this, just to tell you, where I see this mistake made most is, there's 25 some companies, very aggressive market. They're doing a lot of selling. They get the ears of your C-levels or even your board members, and they believe that buying one of these solutions is the answer to their detection problem. And at best, it's one of the components of your detection solution. I guess I could have skipped to that slide. That's what I'm saying there. Okay, so let's talk about these things. So this is passive network monitoring, and it's very similar in many ways to your classic network intrusion detection systems that have been running on the enterprise for many years. You connect them to span ports on switches so you can passively monitor the data. A lot of these systems, the main benefits people are seeing today are signature-based. They talk a lot about anomaly detection and behavioral analytics and all these sorts of things, but when you actually see the demos and see them run on real events, I would say at least more than half, maybe even a higher percentage of that, of the alerts you get are signature-based, just like the traditional IDS. And then you also have the same issues that they spew out a ton of data. And when they deployed these network IDSs on the enterprise network, a classic thing happened, probably no surprise to you. They generated all this useful data that no one looked at because it was just way too much. Same thing is happening here. These tools have the same challenges to them. So what's new about them is they're able to process and parse ICS protocols. I'll talk more about that in a second. They do have some anomaly detection. So they will tell you, for example, if there's a new component on your network talking to another new component on a new port. Okay. They're not really at the point where we want, kind of the holy grail where we'd like to see process variable anomaly detection, where they don't actually tell you, hey, this is not possible. This thing happening over here in your process and this thing happening over here, physically that's not possible. Something weird's going on. They're not doing that yet, but they'll get better and better in anomaly detection. But right now, again, it's much more signature-based than maybe the hype would tell you. And then the other thing is that's a little unique is, and this has always been true, even back when we were doing them in 2004, they alert on legitimate commands, which might seem strange because you'd say, well, wait a minute, why, if this is a legitimate command, why would you generate an alert? But there's some things that are rare and potentially high consequence that you want to know about as an asset owner. For example, if someone is uploading new firmware to all my PLCs or controllers, that could have a significant impact on your network, and you probably would know if that's taking place. So that's a little bit different. Now, when we talk about ICS protocols, 2 years ago this was a big deal. And in fact, when these companies started out, I had some of the companies that had been in the ICS and ICS security business for decades come up to me and say, oh, these newcomers, we really don't have to worry about them. It'll take them a decade before they understand these protocols. They're so complex, there's so many of them. They've been proven wrong. The packet jockeys at these companies can take in a new protocol, dissect it, get value out of monitoring it very quickly. So, the list of protocols they support has grown tremendously, and in fact, they're so hungry right now. If you have a system and they don't support your protocol, you send them some packet captures, they'll support it in a month or two. They're still that hungry. There used to also be an issue with how deep was their support. How much of the protocol did they understand and were they looking at? Again, that's mainly not an issue anymore, except if you're looking at companies that are really not ICS specialized. Like if you were to look at a Palo Alto firewall, they have app IDs that support ICS protocols. Some of those app IDs only look at 1 byte. So they'll look at 1 byte in position 8, and they'll say, oh, that's this protocol, and they'll claim to support it. Not really a problem with the companies on that list. So real quick check is you just say, here's my protocols, do you support them? you're not going to rule out many companies that way. These products are really cool. Okay, if you haven't seen these, you'll be amazed by them. Once you convince your operations team that it's actually safe to connect them to the span port on your switch, which still sometimes takes a while, even though they don't do anything but just listen. But once you do that, there's amazement. Your security people are amazed, your OT people are amazed, and surprisingly, your engineers in your operations are amazed because they see all this stuff that they didn't know. They're like, oh, this talks to that, and that's why that happens? And then they'll say, can you show me this? What about this device at this IP? Who's that talking to? They love it. Okay, they love the information they can get through this passive network monitoring. So that's kind of a nice first step, and that's what actually leads to a lot of the pilot projects that you hear about. You'll get, someone will come in, it'll be maybe a friend, or maybe it's through a sales call, they'll come in, they'll deploy it. They'll say, oh, this is really cool, and the vendor will say, hey, would you like to run a pilot for the next 2 months? We'll just leave it installed. So that's why you're seeing so many pilots, because a lot of them are being done for low or no cost. But it's very hard to determine how good they are in detection. It's actually quite easy to determine how good they are in asset inventory, because you'll get an asset inventory from them. You can check it against what you have today, and maybe those things you didn't know about, you can actually run those down and say, yeah, they really did find that thing. That's good. But when it comes to actually testing their detection, it's really hard, because hopefully you don't have a lot of attacks flowing around your network, and hopefully not a lot of moderately skilled or nation-state types attacks on your network. So how do you know if it works or not? They'll have a few packets to give you examples that, of course, will work because they generated the packets and tested the demo. But what you need to do is you actually need to go out somehow and create an event that then you can test these against. And this is what we tried to do the last 2 years at S4. And just to give you an idea of one of the things that we learned from this, last year, or actually just a month ago, this year at S419, we captured data from, this was from a mining site, so not electric, but from a mining site. We attached to half the switches for about 2 hours, and we got 400 gigs of data. And this is just one mine, so you can imagine if you have multiple systems generating that much data, it's a lot of data. We pared it down to 130 gigabytes, and we gave that to the vendors, and it crashed some of their systems. Okay. So one of the things when you're considering these solutions before you invest in them is you really have to understand what is the bandwidth of data that you're going to ask them to process at what location. And how do they do this? Do they process it some at the edge and then forward some to the central site? Others want everything brought back to one site for analysis. So make sure what you're testing in your pilot or your initial install and your eventual plan will actually be supported by this product. So you have that just that bandwidth of the product processing it, but then the other kind of tricky thing is you have the human bandwidth. How are you going to look at all this detection data, all these events and alerts? And this is something, again, this is one of those things we really don't know how this is going to shake out. So one way of doing it is these people provide you with a product. You have an administration console where they'll generate alerts, and you can do analysis and correlate various things together. So you could say, this is my standalone detection engine, and you could just use that. But then you're not tying that into the other information that I said. Your endpoint alerts, your net flow data, your firewall logs, your administrative users. None of that's tied together. The next step would be to tie all that together, but just do it on the ICS or the OT side. So you actually have a SIM that takes in the data from this new solution as well as all these other data sources, analyzes it. You have a couple of analysts in a secure operations center just looking at the OT. And then the third way, and this is the way that I expect larger organizations will go, is you'll send it up to your enterprise SOC, your Secure Operations Center, and they'll analyze it there. Now, the one thing all three of those have in common is they require some OT and OT security talent to be effective. So wherever you do it, you're going to need to make sure you have the right talent looking at that, and that's not a small thing. That talent isn't in great supply today, and they're expensive. So you have to, before you start saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to use it for detection, you don't want to fall and make the same mistake we made in the enterprise 15, 20 years ago, where you install it and nobody looks at it. If you're using it for detection, expect that you will need a team monitoring it. And those last 2 points lead me to this. I think if you only take one thing from this talk, this is what I'd like you to take, is that whatever you're doing in this area, slow down, okay? This is brand new. It's going to change a lot. We don't know how it's going to work. You don't know how you're going to analyze this data. So you definitely want to do a pilot, and I think most people are pretty good at that. They're piloting these systems. But then they decide, oh, we're going to select, and I've actually had to talk down a couple of asset owners from this. They say, oh, we really liked vendor X, and so we're going to buy that for our entire system. Big mistake. Okay, you want to buy it for one or two of the sites that you feel really good about. Make sure you can even look at and analyze that data. The other thing that's going to happen is these products, as I said at the beginning, they're going to change so much that you might want a completely different solution 2 years from now. So you don't want to be in the position of having sold your management that you have come up with the solution for detection in ICS or OT. You're better off selling them, hey, we tried this, we got some value out of it, we're going to try it at another location, but listen, I might come back to you 2 years saying this way we were going was dead wrong. We're going to decide to switch our product, switch our strategy, and go a completely different way. Okay, so just make sure you position this right to management when you're selling them on this. Okay, so in the last little bit here, I want to actually talk about the companies in the market and where they're currently stacked up. And the funny thing is, after we did the challenge a few weeks ago at S4, I've gotten, contacts from 3 more companies in this space that say, hey, you got to see our product, it's the best, we'll give you a demo. Okay, so this area is still getting a lot of funding, but it's shaken out quite a bit in 2018. And one of the things that you have to realize here is that you might not be comparing apples to apples. Okay, so in that word cloud, you can segment them a little bit based on whether they're more asset inventory, asset management based, or detection based. So the asset inventory and management based is much smaller. A company called PAS has been doing this for a long time. And they're an example where if you go to their site, they'll say they have a detection capability, but they're like 90% asset inventory, 10% detection. Langner is just purely asset management, and there's a couple of others. And then you've got all the other ones that, say they do some of this. But if you're really focused on an asset management solution, you probably shouldn't be leaning towards one that's really putting all the resources into detection. Buy the right product for the right purpose. Now on the detection side, where most of them are competing because this is where they see their long-term value and the long-term win. And this is the reason that they were able to raise all that funding. They sold the story that everyone's going to want a detection system. So this is where the competition is hottest. As I mentioned, it is really difficult to determine which one is best technically. I've seen the demos. I've seen them installed. I can't even tell you that I know which ones are the best technically. Some of the ones that I would put in the bottom tier might be the best technically, but you just can't see it. It took us to the reason I put this back up here, it took us about 500 hours, not including capturing and anonymizing the packets, but it took us about 500 hours to create the moderate to nation state type attack that we integrated into the PCAPs to test the systems. So you either need to be prepared to spend substantial time creating your test, or you're going to have to rely on something else to determine which ones might meet your needs. About the only thing you can do technically with these systems without devoting a lot of time is you can analyze their GUI. You can say, okay, what would be the analyst experience of using this? And some are much better than others. I would say of the 25, I'd throw 10 out just because their GUI is completely unusable. Okay. But I do believe in 2018 we had a shakeout in the industry and a clear tiering of the solutions. And by the way, we don't sell, install, reinstall, maintain. We have no dog in this fight. It's just, as an analyst, I find it fascinating. But the top four that we saw really move up way above the rest in 2018 were Clarity, Dragos, Forescout, and Nozomi. Again, I'm not saying those are technically the best, but I'll tell you why they moved out in front. And then below those, there's a second tier. It's a pretty big gap, but there's a second tier that is like a CyberX and Indigi, and there's probably one or two others in that second tier that I just don't have enough visibility to identify. And also with the caveat that this is a US market, there could be someone killing it in Europe that I'm not aware of. We don't have a lot of visibility in Europe. And then you have all the rest. Now, one of the things about the rest, those 15 or 20 in the rest category, they don't like being in that category, by the way. They don't like it when I tell them they're not top tier. I get a lot of phone calls. And when I get these phone calls, they say, how can you say that? We have these reference accounts. And most of them will have really strong reference accounts. And you might say, well, how can they not be top tier if they don't have reference accounts? Or if they have those? And it's really a couple reasons. One is some of them were reference accounts for a couple years ago when this was all new. For example, it's public knowledge that Southern Company's Power Gen selected Next Defense. A couple of years ago, they were one of the first ones in the market. They were one of the first ones to make an investment. In other cases, you have the instances where, again, somebody knew somebody, they got it installed, they did a pilot at low or no cost, and they said, we'll give you this for this facility if we can use you as a reference account. So you really have to take the reference accounts with a grain of salt. But these are the reasons why I believe those four companies have really moved out front. One is we're seeing in the bake-offs, the tests, when people are going out for a competition to say, we're going to select one of these products, we see those top four, Clarity, Dragos, Forescout, which was Security Matters until Forescout bought them, in case you don't know that name, and then Nozomi. We see those as 2 or 3 of those are in almost every competition. They're just in a lot more deals. And then maybe one of the others is in that competition. So they are just getting a lot more access to potential deals, and that's, of course, increasing their installed base, which is helping them move ahead of the game. The other thing that we're seeing is those companies' growth rates are dramatically faster. They're accelerating so fast right now. They're going from like 15 people 2 years ago to 100 plus now, and they're adding 10 people a quarter. So that level of acceleration, again, to be able to even participate in the bake-offs and pilots, if you're invited, you're needing so much growth, so many people. It's also helping you iterate your product faster, support the people that you're installing. So this growth rate is leaving the others behind. So the gap is actually getting larger in our experience. Now, and then the last one, R&D, as you can imagine, this is iterating the product faster because they have a lot more development engineers. They're getting a lot more information back from customers. It's just this virtuous cycle. Now, I just want to be clear, this battle is not over. There's a good chance one of those four will drop out of the top tier, and there's a good chance someone else will move up. Someone could be one large, very large, high visibility contract for moving into the top tier. Or maybe somehow there will be an actual technical evaluation and someone will be ranked top tier technically, and that would give them a big boost. So it's not over, but that's what we're seeing today. And with that, that's my contact information. I'll actually tweet out, I've got a page of analysis of articles and podcasts and videos on this marketplace that I'll tweet out here in a few minutes when I'm off the stage, in case you're more interested. But I think I left some time for questions.
Yeah, we have time for about 5 minutes.
Oh, Andy.
Wonderful talk, Dale. Good to see you again in a warm climate. I know I believe your ego is sufficiently mature, but is there anybody else that knows as much or similar to you? I imagine the IDCs, Foresters, Gartners don't really track this stuff. I bet there's got to be, in order for all this action to be happening, there's got to be some pretty savvy VCs starting to develop some knowledge through repetition of encountering opportunities. You seem to be the one. Are you the only one who keeps this knowledge at this level?
Of course, yes. Thank you. I'll catch you later. No, so this is one of the funny things, actually. One of the problems that the industry is actually having is that these companies are hiring up a lot of people that would fit in the category you're talking about. So it's just amazing how that, first of all, it's not a huge pool of talent, and then if you have talent and you were independent and you could do this analysis, there's a good chance that one of these companies hired you in the last year. So that's one of the issues. I'm sure there are people, and actually there's a few asset owners in the electric sector who have tested these thoroughly, who have spent the 500, 800, 1,000 hours testing these things, developing them and testing them. And those people clearly know as much. They're just, they can't talk about it. One of the funny things, though, related to that is, and this just shows you how new this market is, I've seen people that I really respect do this testing and actually spend the time to do the testing, have the same companies in the bake-offs and come up with different answers. So I see Clarity over there. One of them might say, Clarity's the best. We love Clarity. Another person I respect did their own testing, really didn't like Clarity. Just don't see it. Don't know what people see in that. It wasn't good. We really like Nozomi. So I don't think that at this point there is a clear market leader. It's just more of a tiers. Yeah.
Are you seeing differentiation though by industry? There's some anecdotal evidence that some are stronger in electric utilities, some are stronger in oil and gas. Have you seen that distribution?
Early on, that was based primarily where their product was developed. So what, if they were oil and gas, they supported the DCSs used in oil and gas, and we saw some of that. That reason has gone away a little bit in the market leaders. We are seeing some stronger in various sectors, but if I had to guess now, it's more based on sales and marketing than it is based on product capability.
When do you expect to see these products appear on the Gartner Magic Quadrant? Or do you assume that they will even show up at some point? I know you don't work with Gartner.
No, I don't work for Gartner. I'm sure Gartner will do it because they'll be able to sell reports. I don't sell reports either. I've been underwhelmed by Gartner's analysis of the space. Especially a lot of the industry people that cover this space, the numbers they have for market sizing, are just so crazy. They're off by factors of thousands that it's hard to take their analysis seriously, in my view. Yes?
Thanks so much for your comments about using a pilot, starting slow. Do you have some recommendations to put forth, say a mid-tier utility that's just getting into the space and they say, okay, I want to do a pilot. If you were to say, okay, count the cost, meaning in terms of personnel hours to show up and install some equipment, getting local engineers to look at results and interacting between operations center, what kind of staffing should people be thinking about?
That's a really good question. The installation is not such a big deal. And even the bandwidth issues that I talked about, there's something you have to think about, a little less probably in the case that you said as opposed to this mine example that I had. I think that you're going to see eventually these solutions be more distributed processing just to deal with that and have models that can handle all that data. The real question you have to ask yourself is what expectations you have for your detection capability internally, and then what are you telling your management you're capable of doing. So for example, you could take one of these solutions and you could say, the way we're going to monitor this, our detection strategy is every morning the engineer on duty is going to look at the portal, and any alerts at this level or higher are going to generate a call out to this security person. You know, in that case, that's not a huge burden, right? Or you could say, no, we need to be, when something's happening on our network, we need to know immediately, so I'm going to have an OT security expert staffed all the time, in which case, you know, what is it? People with control rooms know how many people you need to staff up for 24/7 monitoring, so then you just leverage those costs. So you have to make that decision. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll be around if you have any other questions.